Hello, my name is Ange de Lumière, and every Sunday evening, UK time, I come and give you a short video under 10 minutes to tell you what the energies of the week are going to support. So, I use my Healing Burnout with the Angels deck, but before I pull the card, and today I've decided not to pull it ahead of time, so I'm going to be as surprised as you are. Um, I'm a sustainable success mentor. And I help people reach new levels of success by setting up the foundations through my EPIC framework. So each letter of EPIC stands for a specific area that I feel that you need to have very strong so that this supports your next level of success. I'm not going to teach you how to do business strategy. There are business coaches for that. For me, it's foundational and it uses spiritual tools. So the E stands for epic, the P stands for prosperity, the I stands for intuition, and the C stands for clarity, courage, and confidence. And I believe that if you have those four things in place, you are much less likely to burn out in your business or in your career. So I work mostly with ambitious, caring, and passionate individuals. Sometimes these people have imposter syndrome or are perfectionists. And of course, that roots back into the way they were raised. Right. So I'm going to ask the cards now. What is the energy of the week? What message does my audience need to hear today so that they can have a smoother week ahead? And the card is boundaries. So boundaries is talked a lot about these days, which is good. It's going to make my job simpler. Um, and it starts usually by knowing exactly what you're prepared to put up with and what you're not prepared to put up with, but also knowing your priorities so that you know when you have a full agenda or a full diary and being able to say no rather than adding one more thing because you're afraid to say yes. Now, learning to say no can be a long-term plan. It can take a long time, especially because most of us have been raised to say yes to our parents, to please our parents. It's almost built in us as a survival mechanism, regardless of whether our parents had our best interest at heart or not. This is also why at the age, when we reach our teenage years, there's often conflicts with our parents because at that point, the child or us, uh, we've all been children at this stage, rebels against their parents and start forming their own opinions and their own views. And so that's when we start to learn to say no. Well, there's also a bit of a short period in the toddler years. However, by then, most of us have been trained incredibly well to be people pleasers, especially if we've had parents who weren't actually available to parent or who had parenting techniques that were, I'm going to say, rooted in the past rather than in psychology. And so we might have a tendency to think that we need to do something in order for people to appreciate us. And if we're in that cycle, we're actually constantly saying yes to things that we don't really want to do because we're afraid that if we say no, we are going to be rejected. Now, some of this is also rooted in the fact that up until now, and still to a certain extent, even though we're trying to ignore it, human beings need to live in communities in order to survive, or at least in order to thrive. And of course, if you say no, you always have the risk that the community is going to reject you, especially if it's a family setting and you're perhaps the black sheep. For that reason, we have a tendency to give in and not to be brave enough. And this is not a judgment at all. Courage requires, I was going to say courage, that's ridiculous. Courage is not something that we're taught, right? And courage can put us in danger. So it needs also to be informed by an understanding of the situation, and how safe is it to stand up and to say no, right? So always keep safe and make sure you're safe when you're going to say no, because there's certain environments where the no is not going to be well received, and it could have consequences that affect your well-being or even your livelihood. So be very, very mindful of that. So this is not a universal advice. However, because this card has come up, the energies of the week are going to support you into starting to think about what you like to say, what you'd like to do, when you'd like to say no, when you'd like to say yes, and to start pushing back a little bit on how society has been training you to behave. Now, I want to say that I was myself a people pleaser for many, many years. I had very few boundaries, even though interestingly, sometimes when people don't have boundaries, they also overstep over other people's boundaries. I didn't have that issue because I know how painful and how it's not just irritating, but it's just invalidating when someone doesn't respect your boundaries. So I was very respectful of other people's boundaries, but mine were very, very loose because I kept on looking at, the background of the person, and I made a lot of allowances because perhaps they had a bad childhood, whatever it is. And so I weakened my boundaries in function or in response to someone's past and lived experience. But actually, this is not healthy. This is not kind, and this is not compassionate for either the two people. So interestingly enough, I started saying no more and more often. And when you just start to say no and you just start to set your boundaries, you can have a tendency to be a bit aggressive, right? So watch out for that. If you very rarely say no, the first few no's that you're going to say, or the first few boundaries you're going to set, you might be overcompensating for how long you've waited to do that. So that energy is going to spring forward and be a little bit in people's faces. So be mindful of that and perhaps hold back a little bit. Before saying no, you could say, let me check my diary, or let me talk to a certain person. If you have to talk to your significant other, who knows? You might not have one, in which case you'll have to find another reason. But like saying to someone, let me check my diary is always a good idea. And don't be tempted to check your phone right away, because most people manage their diaries on their phone. Just say you have to check at home because whatever. This will help you if you really want to say, because it might be that once you decide to set those boundaries, you might get angry at people who actually try to push them or try to violate them. So you might have all that pent up anger, maybe some years of resentment in you about not having been respected. You might even actually resent people asking you things because that puts you in a position to having to say yes when really you don't want them to ask you. And that's passive aggressive. So you want to change that as well. You want to come to a space where you are confident about your boundaries. And when you say no with grace. Now, let me tell you, this has taken me absolutely years. And very often when we're new to boundaries, we tend to want to justify why we set those boundaries. However, the more you justify your boundaries, the more you actually open the door for the other person to argue about it and to push them further. So be aware of that. Try to say no. And try to remember, and I like when people say that no is a complete sentence. You don't have to add anything to it. You don't have to explain yourself. You can just say no. And watch the reaction of the person who is the recipient of your no. If you've known them for a long time, if you've always said yes to them, and suddenly you say no, they might react quite badly to it. But this will show you that actually perhaps the relationship is not as genuine as you thought it would be, or as genuine as you thought it was. It could actually be that the person likes you because they use you and that you're always available for them. And you might actually realize that at that point as well, that maybe that person really wasn't there for you in response to all the times you've said yes to them. Maybe when you ask them something, they actually say no very easily. So the relationship has an imbalance. So all that, you want to pay attention. I want to invite you as well to journal or take notes if you don't have a proper journal or a notebook where you write down your thoughts and observations about what's happening in your life. But if you don't journal yet, I will really invite you to start doing that. We're not going to do a video about journaling at this point. I'm finished with my points, but I'm sure if you search the word journaling, you'll have quite a few ideas of how to do that. So that's the advice for this week. That's the energy of the week. Start playing with your boundaries. It could be also, and I'm going to add this as a last thought, that your boundaries have been too rigid. Like perhaps you've said, I will never do such and such a thing. And perhaps you should revisit that because maybe there's something really good in there for you. You can be the judge of that, but sometimes we can be set in our ways. So that's the energy for the week. I'm really excited about it. And please come back to this video, comment underneath if you found it interesting, share it with people that you think might find it interesting as well. And I'll speak to you again next week. Bye for now.